So yeah, we've been talking about some pretty dire consequences, but the good news is scientists are on top of it. They're working really hard to understand exactly what's happening with the ACC.
That's good to hear. So how are they going about it? What are they actually doing?
Well, for one, they're collecting tons of data,
Hmm.
using satellites, research vessels with all the latest tech, and even running super complex computer simulations.
That's impressive. And what kind of data are they looking for exactly?
Everything, really. They're measuring the current's speed, temperature, salinity, all that stuff. It's all about tracking how the ACC is responding to these changes brought on by climate change. The more data we have, the better we can predict what's going to happen in the future.
So it's like having a doctor constantly monitoring the patient's vital signs, right? Making sure they're stable.
Exactly. But data collection is just the first step, right? We need to actually do something with all that information.
Right, of course. What kind of action is being taken?
Well, the good news is there's a huge global effort to address climate change, which, as we've discussed, is the root cause of this whole ACC slowdown situation. You've probably heard of the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, the Paris Agreement.
Right. Almost 200 countries have signed on to this agreement, and the goal is to keep global warming way below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan, but how does that actually help protect the ACC?
The agreement sets targets for countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, which are the big drivers of climate change. A lot of countries are now putting policies in place to switch to renewable energy, make their industries more energy efficient, and protect their forests. All these actions, if they actually happen, could slow down global warming and hopefully stabilize the ACC.
That's good to hear. So there's action at the global level, but what about us, the average folks? Is there anything we can do in our everyday lives to help protect the ACC?
Absolutely. Every little thing we do, from the food we eat to how we get around, can make a difference. It all comes down to reducing our carbon footprint. If we all do our part, it'll add up to a big change globally.
Can you give us some specific examples? Like what kind of changes can we actually make?
Sure, little things like switching to energy-efficient appliances, using public transport more, biking, walking, all that helps. You can also try to eat less meat and always support businesses that are making sustainability a priority.
So it's all about making conscious choices and being more mindful of our impact on the environment.
You got it.
Yeah.
It might feel overwhelming, but if millions of people make small changes, it can create a big ripple effect, a positive one this time.
That's a good point. It's a team effort, right? We all need to pull in the same direction.
Exactly. And remember, we can also use our voices to push for change. Support politicians who are pushing for policies that protect the environment, hold them accountable.
Yeah, making our voices heard. So we've got these big global agreements like the Paris Agreement, things we can do individually in our daily lives, and speaking up for change. It's a multi-pronged approach, but it gives me hope that we can actually turn things around.
I agree. The challenges are real, but there's definitely a growing movement for change. And remember, this isn't just about saving some random current in a far-off place. It's about protecting the entire planet's life support system.
That's a great reminder. It's all connected. What happens in Antarctica affects us all, even if we live thousands of miles away. Speaking of Antarctica, let's shift gears a bit and talk about how the ACC slowdown is impacting the ecosystem down there.
Ah, yes, the ecosystem. It's a truly unique place, unlike anywhere else on Earth, a frozen world teeming with life that has adapted to some of the harshest conditions imaginable.
It's an incredible place. But we've talked about how those waters are warming up, becoming less salty because of climate change and the melting ice. What does that mean for all the creatures that call Antarctica home? What's going to happen to them?
Well, there's a real chance we could see some major consequences. Think about krill, for example, those tiny crustaceans that are like the base of the whole Antarctic food web. Warmer water could really mess with their numbers and where they're found.
Krill, right. I remember you saying they're like the keystone species down there. Like if they disappear, the whole ecosystem collapses.
Exactly. And you know what krill feed on? Phytoplankton, these microscopic algae that need cold, nutrient-rich water to survive.
So warmer water, less phytoplankton, less krill.
That's the worry. And it's not just the warmer water either. The decline in sea ice, also because of climate change and the ACC slowdown, is a problem too.
Oh, right, the sea ice. I remember reading about that in the Live Science article.
Sea ice is actually crucial for krill. The young krill, the larvae, they use the underside of the sea ice as a refuge and feeding ground. Less sea ice, less space for the krill babies to grow up.
Double whammy for the krill. Warmer water and less sea ice, both bad news.
Unfortunately, yeah. And it all comes back to climate change and that slowing ACC.
And if the krill population crashes, then what? What happens to the penguins, the seals, the whales?
Well, that's the big concern, isn't it? Penguins, for instance, they depend on krill, especially during breeding season. They need to pack on the pounds to feed their chicks. If there's not enough krill, they might have to travel further to find food, leaving their chicks more vulnerable to predators.
Makes sense. And it's not just penguins, right? Seals and whales rely on krill, too.
Absolutely. Some seals, like the crab-eater seal, have these special teeth that are perfect for filtering krill out of the water. If krill decline, those seals are going to be in trouble. Not enough food, their health suffers, they might not be able to reproduce it successfully. And then there are the whales.
The whales, yeah, they're big krill eaters, too, right?
Oh yeah. Baleen whales, like humpbacks and minks, they swim all the way down to Antarctica in the summer to feast on krill. They eat tons of them. If the krill disappear, it could really mess up their migration and feeding patterns. We might even see their populations decline.
So basically what we're seeing here is that a slower ACC could disrupt the whole Antarctic ecosystem, from the tiniest krill all the way up to the biggest whales.
It's a pretty clear example of how everything on Earth is connected and how much damage climate change can do.
It's definitely a lot to think about. But before we wrap things up, I'd like to bring it back to us humans for a minute. How does this ACC slowdown affect people, especially those who depend on the Southern Ocean?
That's an important point. The ACC slowdown isn't just some abstract environmental problem. It has real implications for people, especially for those who rely on the Southern Ocean for food and their livelihoods.
You're talking about the fishing industry, right? The Southern Ocean is a big fishing ground for krill, isn't it?
It is. People harvest krill for all sorts of things like fish food, omega-3 supplements, you name it. But with climate change and the ACC slowdown, the sustainability of those krill fisheries is a real concern.
So we could see a drop in the amount of krill being caught, which would have consequences for the global seafood market. That's a big deal.
Absolutely. And it's not just krill either. Changes in the ACC could also affect the number and distribution of other commercially important fish, like Patagonian toothfish and Antarctic icefish.
So we're talking about potential economic losses, people losing their jobs, maybe even food shortages in some parts of the world. The human cost of this is significant.
It really is. And it all underscores the need to manage those Southern Ocean resources sustainably, taking into account climate change and all the ways humans are impacting the ACC.
Sustainable management, that's the key, right?
Yeah.
Finding a way to use the resources without destroying them in the process.
Exactly. It requires international cooperation, solid scientific research, and a commitment to responsible fishing practices.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about the science behind the ACC slowdown, the potential consequences for the planet and everyone living on it, and all the efforts being made to tackle this problem. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder. The ACC is often called the heart of the ocean because it's so vital to global ocean circulation and climate regulation. So if this heart is slowing down, what does that say about the health of our planet as a whole?
That's a really profound question. The ACC slowdown is a symptom of a bigger issue: our unsustainable relationship with the natural world. We've been pushing the planet too hard for too long, and now we're seeing the consequences.
It's a wake-up call, a reminder that we're all connected and our actions matter.
You said it. The future of the ACC, and really the future of the planet, depends on the choices we make today. We have the knowledge, the technology, the resources to make things right. What we need now is the collective will to act.
We've been talking a lot about this ACC slowdown, its effects on the planet, the big picture. But I think it's easy to lose sight of what's really at stake here. So imagine, for a second, you're standing on the edge of Antarctica. It's freezing cold. The wind's whipping around you. What do you see? What are we actually trying to save?
You'd see a place that's unlike anywhere else in the world. Huge glaciers, massive ice shelves, and the ocean. It's teeming with life, all kinds of creatures that have figured out how to survive at these crazy conditions. You might see penguins, waddling around, maybe even spot a whale out in the water. It's a beautiful place, but it's also incredibly delicate.
And as we've been discussing, this slowdown of the ACC, it's directly impacting that delicate balance, right? We talked about the effects on the food web, how warmer water and less sea ice could lead to fewer krill. What does that mean for those iconic Antarctic animals, the ones we all know and love?
Well, let's take penguins as an example. They need a lot of krill, especially when they're breeding. They got to fuel up to feed their chicks, right? But if there isn't enough krill, they might have to travel further to find food, leaving their chicks alone and vulnerable.
So it's not just about the penguins themselves, it's about their ability to raise the next generation. What about the seals and the whales? How are they affected?
Seals are in the same boat as the penguins. They depend on krill, too. Some of them, like the crab-eater seals, have special teeth for filtering krill out of the water. If krill numbers drop, these seals won't have enough to eat. Their health will suffer. They might not be able to have as many pups.
It's like a chain reaction, right? One thing leads to another, and pretty soon the whole ecosystem is falling apart.
Exactly. And the whales are part of that chain, too. Baleen whales, like humpbacks and minks, they migrate all the way to Antarctica to feed on krill. They need massive amounts of it. If the krill disappear, their whole migration pattern gets disrupted. Could even lead to a decline in their populations.
It's kind of scary when you think about it. We're not just talking about some abstract changes to currents, we're talking about real impacts on real animals, animals that we all find fascinating.
And it's not just the animals themselves, it's the whole ecosystem. Everything in Antarctica is interconnected, perfectly balanced. If one species starts to struggle, it can have knock-on effects throughout the entire food web.
It's a reminder that we're all connected, even those of us who live far away from Antarctica. What happens down there affects us all.
Absolutely. The slowdown of the ACC and its impact on the Antarctic ecosystem, it's like a mini version of the bigger problems we're facing globally.
Right.
Climate change, loss of biodiversity, the fact that everything on Earth is linked.
So we've explored the science of the ACC slowdown, looked at the potential consequences, and talked about what we can do to address it. It's a complex issue, and it can feel overwhelming. But if the ACC is the heart of the ocean, maybe we can think of ourselves as the cardiologists, trying to diagnose and treat this ailing heart.
I like that analogy. And just like with a heart condition, the earlier we catch it, the better the chances of fixing it. We need to act now to reduce our impact on the planet, find more sustainable ways to live, and protect that delicate balance of all the Earth's systems.
It's a call to action for all of us, a reminder that we all have a role to play in protecting the planet and all its inhabitants. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. We hope you learned something new, maybe even felt inspired to make a difference. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.